so October 10th, 2018, meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals. Do I have to do a call to order?
Yes.
And does someone need to second that? All right, I'm just going to call it to order then. And then the first thing is the approval of the agenda as written.
I'll make that motion.
Any second?
Second.
Okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so that approves the agenda. And then the approval of the minutes for September 6th, 2018. Does anyone have any comment? Are we ready to approve those, or you want to hold off till next month?
I read them. Yeah, I read them. I thought they were okay.
Oh, do you want a second at least?
Sure.
Okay, so a motion is made and seconded.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so that's the approval of the minutes. So the first application before us today is 19-18 at Crazy LLC, 9 Westchester Street, Uri Bencat, presenting and is not here. The staff report says we don't have any more information, although we did make some requests. Attorney Arthur Reed is here for the abutter.
That's correct. Just to clarify the situation, prior to the last meeting, we'd been in communication with the owner and his representative, Mr. Benkat, and we had prepared an agreement under terms of which certain limited entry upon my client's property would be permitted. And initially we were told that was fine. Then at the last meeting we were informed that the owner wished to have it reviewed by his counsel, and we said, everyone said that's fine. It was continued for that purpose. We've heard absolutely nothing from the owner or from any representative of his since, and we continue to be ready to enter into an agreement that will allow that to take place. But I think that under the circumstances, the matter should probably be continued. I mean, if they're not showing up, I don't know when your period runs out, but we're perfectly amenable to its being continued if they want to do that.
Is our meeting?
We have a meeting on the 8th.
Yeah, so we'll have to figure it out by the next meeting. Okay.
Because I assume that if they want to do the work this winter, because we're not going to let them work outside in the summer,
Right.
that they would want to get this approved ASAP.
One would assume.
But
But we all know what happens when we assume.
Yes. Does someone want to make that motion to continue?
I'll make that motion
second.
Okay.
to November 8th.
All those in favor?
Thank you.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay.
I would assume that, Eleanor, you'll be in some touch with them to let them know that it's continued.
Yes, I just never hear back.
I just hate to have the thing hanging out there, It's
Well, they have to
nuisance
sign
have to come to
and
meetings not knowing what they're going to do.
well, and they have to sign a continuance, right? If they don't resolve it by the 8th.
Yeah.
Or else it
I
gets-
sent him a continuance. I think Rowan agreed to it last month, and we have that on tape, and I didn't find the form that he signed, it went missing. So I sent it to your event the other day. I never got the email because I had a confirmation, and I have not heard from him. Sent it again this morning, and I said, please sign this and please come to the meeting. And I have not heard.
And was that all the information you're waiting for, was an agreement with the neighbor?
Yeah.
That was it?
I'm not sure what they're planning to do or what the holdup is.
Yeah.
I've certainly been in plenty of contact with Stephen Cohen about other things since the last meeting, and the subject has never come up at all. So I don't know whether he really has been engaged in the matter or not.
Okay. Well, we'll circle back next month and go from there.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to 2318 Adam Ross and Emma Ross, 50 Oak Grove Avenue. There's a request to continue this to November 8th,
And when is their,
December 14th.
okay, so I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone else?
Unanimous.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry, I was reading this. Okay, so that'll be continued till November 8th. So next we have 2918 Gordon E. W. Gilbertson and Nancy Ann Gilbertson and 34 Dukes Road LLC. So 32 and 34 Dukes Road with Jesse Brusher presenting for the applicant.
You sitting on these, Eleanor?
You are sitting on this, yes.
The conflicts are Ed and Mark, who both are not here. And Jeff, you're at the table in case there was an issue.
You're not. I guess you were absent.
Jim's not on it,
Why not?
He was not sitting on this the first.
so Jeff has to
Oh,
step in.
am I reading the wrong thing that says you are?
Oh, maybe I have it wrong. Okay.
Right? I have Jim on here and Jeff at the
You're
table.
right. Jim
You're
was
right.
sitting on it, and I remember a remark you made last month, so yes.
Okay,
Sorry about that.
no worries. So Jesse Brusher.
Okay. Good afternoon. So there's been some additional information that's come in. I believe it's all in the staff report. The town council had responded to your request. His opinion is that relief is necessary in this instance if the board sees fit to grant it, but that a finding that no relief is required is not appropriate in town council's opinion. The planning board had recommended, if the board sees fit to grant relief, that a variance is the appropriate method by which to grant relief. And I also provided several instances in which, in the past, the board has granted variance relief for merger situations that were the result, unintentional merger that were the result of someone's passing away and the probate of an estate resulting in an unintentional merger, which I believe is what the board had asked for at the last meeting. I'm happy to answer other questions, and certainly the lots had been separate since their sort of creation. They've been taxed separately by the town, they've been maintained separately, and the only time at which they merged was the result of Charlotte Gilbertson's death. And as a result of the distribution of her estate, they were transferred to the same party. And that was never part of the intention of the parties that they would, that the result of that would be one lot. That the intention and the valuation of those lots in the negotiation of that settlement was always that they were to remain separately buildable. And the parties, when negotiating that in Florida, had absolutely no idea that the result of that distribution would be the unintentional merger of the lots. Also, with respect to shape and size and topography and soil conditions, there are pretty significant grade changes on that lot as well. They are undersized lots which deal with the shape, so we can tie it into the variance language required. But like I said, I'm happy to answer other questions if there are any.
Does anyone have any questions?
I personally, I didn't think they had to come before us, but the town council has advised us to listen to the case. I'll put a motion forward if everybody's ready to approve as requested via variance.
Are there improvements on both of them, or one of them, or?
They're both vacant. I think on one there had been some ramshackle shed thing that collapsed of its own accord, I think, sometime in the 90s or early 2000s, I believe.
Yeah,
But
I don't see it, really. I think this is unique. I mean, unless there's a hardship argument, I don't know why we would allow this to just happen.
I agree.
the hardship is financial, that there's a significant difference in the value between one lot versus two.
Well, that's why I asked if there were improvements. I mean, we usually, in the other instances you provided, it's usually a separate lot in there, so they can't treat it as a separate lot. And there's an improvement on one side, and that really limits them. Where here, it actually could be a windfall. I don't know if the land is now
Right.
twice the size or whatever it is. I don't know if there's hardship like we have in the States.
Yeah. Did everyone read, or make note of on page 171, town council's follow-up?
I read it.
Okay. So, did Jesse get a copy of that at all, Eleanor?
I think so. He said that in his opinion that the no relief is, there is a merger in his opinion, and that in order to protect them as two separately buildable, marketable lots, a variance would be required, which is why we're here.
And everyone feels comfortable with the reasoning on the prior decisions? Is anyone in the audience here to speak about this one?
I mean, the fact that they were sort of taxed separately by the town through the whole process, correct?
Correct.
Well, they were separately owned through the process until she died.
Until she died, right. But then even after she passed away, weren't they
Well,
still?
they were taxed to the estate,
Right,
during the administration, and then once the sort of the assessor's office, it came to light the distribution that was required under the Florida settlement agreement, then they updated their records to reflect that. But prior to that, they've been treated as separate lots, taxed separately.
So my inclination after reading the follow-up that I requested from town council was that even though Nantucket's rules are more permissive, that merger had occurred, the Florida order doesn't undo it, and I was thinking that we would not go the way of a variance, but with the decisions that you found showing that that is actually the history that this board, the way that we have handled this situation in the past, and that it has come up before, I'm inclined to.
Well, the way I read town council's opinion, under the state law, you would have a merger as well, because despite the different ownership names, it's still under common ownership now, right?
Correct.
So we have merger under
Well, yes.
state law and under our more, our liberal county side.
Correct.
Although we've found a way in these past decisions to get past that.
But, I mean, the granting of the variance blesses them. That's sort of, even with respect to state law, it blesses them with respect to as separately buildable and marketable lots.
And Karen, what was your motion again?
To approve it via variance,
Based on,
what town council's recommendations were and what we previously historically given people in the past.
and you want to reference those prior decisions?
We can have Eleanor write those up as far as references.
Right.
You know, if this is written, we need to make sure it's very specific to this case, otherwise we're gonna have situations where someone accidentally merges.
Of course,
And then
you don't want the flood water.
and then they file a corrected deed after they.
I
find
know.
out, and they come to us and, you know, here we have these decisions that show we end up just, you know, granting a variance.
Right, but I don't think too many people are gonna come back to us saying that something happened in Florida and there was a death in the family, and they'd have to give us that storyline, which would, obviously, if that comes before us as suspect, we'll scrutinize it as much as we can, but this one kind of stands on its own.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, you know, why they didn't have any Massachusetts council when, you know, a good portion of the state, I think, was here, you know, just would have prevented the problem, but.
Hindsight's 20/20.
Right.
Certainly, I think if they, in looking back, they would have loved to have done that prior to all of this.
How do you feel about this one, Lisa?
I mean, I think given the prior history, and it seems like it has been granted in the past, I mean, it's hard to come up with the, the variance standard that it meets in my eyes, in my mind, topography, all that stuff. I mean, how do you apply that to this decision? But I don't know that they ever used specific variance standards before in granting this relief. And do we have to?
I mean, topography would probably bolster keeping it all together. if
Right,
they're
I was gonna
using
say.
the plan.
Right,
Right.
I know,
So-
that's the.
Right.
And
exactly.
I'm not sure there's a hardship here. You now have twice the size.
Well,
As-
You can't
it is
build-
financial.
Yeah, I mean, we
Are
have,
they-
we have a buyer
build.
potentially lined up who's not gonna pay the purchase price that's agreed to if they only get to have one lot as opposed to two.
And
It's
they're
different
both-
from a buyer's standpoint, for certainly. They can build, as opposed to what they're able to construct.
Right.
And they could, by right, build, if this was separate lots, or we allow variance, they should put three improvements structured on it, right?
Potentially the
At
primary,
least, I mean,
secondary, and
It's
tertiary.
whatever the ground coverage is, right? It's
Correct. They're undersized lots
can
to
do
begin with, so
two
there isn't a
dwellings
ton
on
of
each.
buildable space
Yeah.
on them. It's whatever the zone
So there's
allows.
definitely more value as two lots.
Correct.
So that would be the hardship of making them keep it separate.
In this fact set, when were these lots created? Do you remember?
It was in the late 70s.
So after zoning came in.
Correct.
Because that sort of, like that I feel like differentiates it from the Fader Levine case.
Right, I agree. I think
Because that was,
those other decisions, they were prior to zoning law.
yeah, I'm just trying to find.
They were,
And
they
the
were
separation
prior
had
to
been a
the,
little bit of the controversy
this was,
initially.
the plan was post-zoning, but they were legally existing prior to the change in the zoning, which is why they're grandfathered. Why they were grandfathered as separately marketable and buildable since that time. That the plan was validly filed before the zoning change, which would have invalidated them, went into effect. And so that's been approved, and then the lots were deeded out separately and maintained as separate buildable lots, maintaining their grandfathered status since that time. And the only trigger was the death of Charlotte Gilbertson, is what resulted in this unintentional merger. Because prior to her death and post creation of these lots, these validly existing lots, as approved by the planning board, they were maintained as separate,
Yeah,
in
but
separate
if you look
ownership.
back, that was a bit of a controversy because he got it in the day after.
Yeah, the day before, I think, and then spent years fighting with the planning board.
Right, so
I
it
think,
wasn't like these existed before, or just by virtue of zoning. Just, sways me a little bit, but it wasn't proof.
And they're keeping, this is different. So just, can you give me, like, what is from these decision, which argument are you?
it's in general that the variance, the variances are often used when the board feels that relief is necessary and there's no other way to get there. So the board has granted variances for time in the past. The link to size, shape, and topography and soil conditions are often tenuous. So, but as a practical matter, the variance is the method that's available to the board to resolve these kinds of issues because there's no other method available. It doesn't fit into a special permit, so a variance is where we are. There's nobody objecting. There is a significant financial hardship as a result, and none of this was intentional. And sort of that's why we're here. The end result would be, again, a significant financial hardship for something that my clients had no knowledge of. It was an unforeseen issue that cropped up as a result of the death of someone in their family.
Right, but actually, the intent was to have the same owner. They just, one of them's dropped into an LLC, the others remained in his name, so the.
But everybody does that in
Well,
Nantucket.
yeah, I mean, and
That's
they've,
allowed.
the intent was that they were two
Right.
separate lots. The intent was
Right.
never that the result was to be one larger lot.
Right. It seems like these all talk about the financial hardship. That's the
They
way to
do, but like
vary it.
one of them is like the family's still gonna, they
On
wanna
the one
stay on
cottage.
one lot in the cottage and they're
Right.
selling the other one, and if it merges, then they lose the cottage and don't have that one, and
But those situations are fixed at that moment in time. I wouldn't be surprised if the family still owned that lot that they held on to. But, I
Right.
mean, it's,
this
that may
is,
be the
Might
story
even be
at that
wrong.
moment, which is
Right.
true, but it doesn't, the decision isn't conditioned upon the family owning that lot forever. It's preserving them as separately buildable lots, and then they can do with them whatever they want after the decision has been made.
I just don't like the wishy-washy, like reasoning for a variance, but, you know, they all have some, like the other one is where, I think it's for Shagru died, so they can't get back at him to,
I mean, the ones that I submitted were a handful. There are dozens, if not 100 or more. I don't know more, maybe much, but there are certainly dozens of these cases where variances were granted in circumstances where lots unintentionally merged as a result of a death of somebody or through other bizarre circumstances. And again, with the variance, each variance request comes before you, as Karam said, and you scrutinize it as appropriate. So it's sort of granting a variance in this case does not mean that you're going to get 50 more variance requests next month. I mean, the situation here is unique, which is why we're here. And we need a relief to bless the lots as separately buildable.
all right. So Karam's motion still stands. Does anyone want to second that or have any further discussion?
I'll second it.
All those in favor of granting the variance, say aye.
Aye.
Could you, tell me who voted what? Unanimous?
I don't, Jim hasn't voted.
Jim didn't.
Up for the ayes.
Hands up for the ayes.
4-1.
Okay,
Okay.
all right. So 4-1.
All set with me?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
So. Okay, so next up we have 3218 Jonathan G. Klatt and Sandra L. Klatt, 7A Hussey Farm Road, Cohen representing. Who's gonna sit in for Ed? Jim, I guess, because Mark's not here. Right, Jim?
So who's on this?
That's fine.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
So it's Lisa, me, Michael, Karam, and Jim.
I'm sorry, what was the word again? Karam? and then-
So Karam, Michael, myself, Lisa, and Jim. Ed
Great.
was sitting, but he's
and
not
was-
here.
Okay, so it's Lisa, Susan, Jim, Karam, and Michael. Thanks. Okay, Stephen Cohen for the applicant. I'll do a brief summary of where we were last time, which is that this house is I think you know, a move-on house that the owner did himself. It's a affordable housing, Nantucket Housing Needs Covenant house. He was able to secure some land from a friend of his and to then move this house onto it. I did, we have one problem with two potential solutions, which is that the house has stairs that are, more than 2 steps, there are more than 2 stairs to get to the ground, and then there's also a landing. And because essentially the house has a unusually high foundation, and because the lot slopes off sort of steeply as it goes away from the house, you have the situation where there's a 1.7 foot encroachment of the stairs into the setback, and there's a bylaw that was adopted at the time this was happening that allowed for that to happen. But the bylaw, instead of reading, which was I think the intent, that you can have up to 2 stairs in the setback, the bylaw says you can get a waiver for up to 2 for a staircase with up to 2 stairs, which is I think not really. It shouldn't really matter how many stairs are involved within the setback, but that's what it says. So the zoning officer has told us we need to get relief or cut off the stairs, which doesn't really work. And the relief sought is one of 2 things: either a waiver of the setback for up to 5 feet, although in this case it's only 1.7 feet, for an unintentional setback created in reliance on a survey plot plan, or in the alternative, a variance from the language of the bylaw, which requires, which provides for the waiver when there's only 2 stairs instead of, which I think it should say, and which I believe it's going to be changed to say in April, to say a waiver of up to 2 stairs in the setback, regardless of how many stairs are on the house in general. In this case, the house was built 5 feet behind the setback. It's not one of these cases where they built the house right to the setback without taking into account that there would be a set of stairs there. And it's just a matter of the topography and setting of the foundation that caused the height to need more stairs than they had anticipated. What the board had requested we do last time was get a letter or something from Bracken Engineering, who had produced the as-built on this, about providing information about how the house had been set in this location in the first place. And what I've discovered after that was, although Bracken had done that work, the actual foundation work was done through Earl and Sullivan. And I talked to Steve Sullivan about it, and I've submitted a letter through the administrator, which she probably has on her computer now, since I forwarded it while I was sitting in the audience over there. And I'll just tell you that letter says that Earl and Sullivan was hired to calculate the location of the house, the face of the house being 5 feet back, and that they staked the location of the corners and footings, and that the homeowner pinned them himself, but when they came back and did the as-built, that the house was in the location where they had staked it. So the house...
Or in the alternative, the house was 3 feet higher than it should have been.
Right, so that's the problem. The problem is not that the house wasn't put far enough back, it's that at the time, the surveyor put it back 5 feet on the assumption that that would be plenty of room for a landing and a couple of stairs, because that's sort of a rule of thumb that they work with. And what they didn't take into account was that this house was going to have a slightly higher foundation, and that was at a place where the grade was not, he specifically said in his letter that they did not calculate the grade or the height of the foundation. And so that's where we end up with this overage. So, essentially the issue is that the homeowner relied on the surveyor, and what the surveyor didn't do was get more information. And I'm not saying it's their fault, but they didn't have enough information really in order to say 5 feet was sufficient. They didn't know what the height of the foundation was, and they didn't know, they didn't take into account the topography. So while reasonable, it was clearly incorrect. So I would ask the board to grant the waiver from the 5-foot rule for the encroachment to the extent we're just talking about the encroachment by the stairs, or in the alternative to grant the variance for that relief.
I just want to make the point that I see Earl and Sullivan in no way doing anything wrong.
Yeah,
They
I don't
didn't
think
set the height of the foundation. They didn't set it 3 feet out of the ground. They were pinning the foundation. If it had been dug down properly, they wouldn't have had 5 or 6 stairs coming off the front of it. So insinuating that they were doing it under a survey, I think is...
Well, I think the problem...
They were told to pin it 5 feet back from the setback.
Well, the 5 feet was determined in consultation with how far do we need to go. And what they didn't do was take into account the fact that the owner was then going to set the foundation higher, and they didn't take into account the grading. But it is definitely not a mistake made by the surveyor.
No.
You know, Steve Sullivan and Dick Earl did not screw this up.
Right. I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, and no one's asserting that they did. But the house was pinned in consultation with a surveyor on how far back, they should account for, and the location was done in that way. So you can certainly make the finding, if you choose to, that it was reasonably done in reliance on survey data.
I would like to look at the other two options versus the relying on a surveyor.
No, yeah, because I don't think that one. I
mean,
mean,
I
that's
think-
usually if they intentionally stake something within a setback because they had
Yeah.
all the information.
And I think
This
if,
doesn't-
I understand that the homeowner worked in the business, but I think if it wasn't the homeowner, if it had been a professional doing this job, then it would have been caught sooner.
I think that's right. I think a general contractor would have had, through more experience, more understanding of, hey, when these variables come into play, the distance is going to grow. And I think Mr. Klatt is in the business, but potentially didn't have experience with that issue. In fact, that's exactly what happened. So I would ask you to grant the relief based on the survey because it's a special permit. If you want to grant relief based on the idea that the bylaw itself is a little funny in the sense that it's looking at the number of stairs and not the number of stairs in the setback. The problem with that is it requires a variance, and I know that you're generally disinclined to grant variances when there's a reasonable special permit option. Frankly, the other option is we could wait until April, but from my client's point of view, that is really killing him with his loan. He'd like to close out his construction loan, and it's a pretty significant hardship for the Klatts to continue at the interest rate and fees and charges associated with that instead of fixing it. So they'd really like to get this resolved without having to wait for a clarification of the bylaw to say that it's the number of stairs in the setback, not the number of stairs total.
But I also hate granting relief based on that interpretation, just because that opens the floodgates until April for other people to come in with that same interpretation. I mean, not that that's going to happen. I don't know how many people are waiting out there. Yeah.
Yeah, right, and we don't, of course, know that
That it's going to pass.
right, it's only speculative.
Right.
So I would ask you to grant the special permit relief available.
Which is the one that's based on using a licensed surveyor?
Reasonable reliance on a survey, yes.
It has to be, so wasn't there another one? It's the setback intrusion less than the 5 feet,
Yeah,
and that one has to be because of reliance on a survey.
yes. Well, not necessarily because of, but you have to have reasonably relied on a survey when it happened.
And we have that letter. Can you read it to us?
About 10 seconds.
Yeah, I'd like.
I'd like to hear it
yeah.
from them as opposed to interpreted from
Sure.
Steve.
Because then, I mean, honestly, if we say reasonably relied, then the surveyor really didn't make an error. It's the homeowner went and did it himself, and is that reasonable reliance?
Yeah, because I think it could have
Because you
been
don't have the
avoided by.
skills.
Well, I don't know how far this is out of the ground in the back, but it certainly looks like it's way out of the ground in the front. He could have just dropped his foundation.
You need to read
He
the
should have.
statement.
Yeah.
This is just it? Oh. Okay, oops. All right. So from Steve Sullivan today at 12:30. So it says, hello, Steve. In review of work that was provided for John Klatt at 7A Hussey Farm Road, we did assist him in the location of the foundation. We had calculated the location at 36 feet off and parallel to the sideline of Hussey Farm Road. We had set stakes for excavation and then set stakes for the placement of footings. The footings were pinned by the client. We did not provide any grades. In later work we had done for the client, we located the corner boards of the house we located the corner boards and the house was built where we had staked it. Anything else, please let me know. Steve S., Stephen J. Sullivan, PLS, Earl and Sullivan.
Right. So, the homeowner did not know to ask the surveyor, are we leaving enough space based on the topography and the height of my foundation? And the surveyor didn't ask the homeowner the same question. And generally, that's why, you want a general contractor, a licensed site supervisor who's got experience with the issue, who's going to know, when you change these variables, it changes the length.
Or more complete drawings.
Or more complete drawings, yes. These drawings are, homeowner,
Yeah.
Right, so I think in my recollection of using this special permit relief, this specific relief, it has been the homeowner coming in when there's been a mistake made because the survey either told them incorrect ground cover or the setback was wrong or something like that. I don't see the surveyor making any error other than not knowing that the client was not going to use a general contractor or go out and do this themselves until after it was done. And I don't know that it's the surveyor's responsibility. And I just on one person, but I think if we say that a homeowner went forward and made decisions on their own, and we term that reasonably relying on a survey, I feel like that's more of a floodgate opener, because
Right.
then.
So in this case, you don't have to make a finding of fault that the surveyor made a mistake. You just have to find among your findings that the homeowner did rely on survey data. And I think in this situation, the fact that you could take into consideration to distinguish it from other situations, that in this case, the encroachment of just a set of stairs is reasonably consistent with the intent of the exception in the bylaw, although not clearly within the black letter of the law, and therefore there's essentially no difference.
But, yeah.
That distinguishment, I think, is enough to narrow this so that it's not everybody coming in and saying, oh, well, I just did whatever I wanted, or I didn't know any better, so I want to be, whatever. I think that because this lines up with this other exception, and that the other exception is written a little funny, but you can still tell, I think at least the intent of it is 2 steps, no more than 2 steps is okay. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I don't really remember why the bylaw was written to 2 steps, but that's generally how many steps you have before you get to landing and then go into a house, because you're usually 2 feet above grade. Whereas he's more like 42 inches above grade.
Right. Most houses, you would find that maybe in town or in some floodplains, but most houses don't have any stairs.
Yeah. So that's why I think the bylaw might have been meant to be specific to 2 steps, not that most people have 2 steps off of a landing and those 2 steps are allowed to be in the setback. Not that it could be 2 out of 5 steps in the setback. But I'm not sure. I don't remember the discussion about that bylaw.
Yeah, I don't know
what the intent of it was.
I don't know that specific scenario was considered.
I mean that, yeah. And I don't know that it should be, that if you want to put your first floor 3 feet out of the ground, that you can allow 2 of your 7 steps be in the setback? No, I don't agree with that at all.
Right.
Unless you're on Orange Street, and you have to be,
Right. Then they
But
all
this
are.
is, to me, a little stretch of that intent of that bylaw,
Well,
personally, but I don't know.
frankly, I'm just trying to help a guy
I know.
with an affordable housing house
I know.
Yeah.
close out his CO and
I
close
know.
out his loan.
That's the part that is.
It in my mind, it gets a little, the mistake is somewhere between pinning the footings. It's not the height of the footings, because they were pinned by the surveyor, but it's the height of the foundation and or the height of the finished grade. And was there a retaining wall planned originally that maybe didn't get built because
There's a retaining
of,
wall.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
I know, but
Yeah.
to bring in more soil though, make it higher,
Yeah.
the parking area and the front of the yard.
No,
That
there was
never
no,
got done, so, I don't know.
they just didn't, frankly,
I mean, the
Think about
surveyor
it.
pinned the footings, and he pinned for the excavation, but he didn't determine the depth of the hole. They dug the hole, he went back and he located
Yeah,
he pinned the
that's right.
footings. He had no knowledge of how far this building was gonna
Yeah.
be out of the ground.
That's where the mistake is. Now, I'm not saying who
Yeah.
made it.
Right.
You know, I could see a reliance on the surveyor in this situation. They didn't even think about this, the depth and for the height. And you reasonably relied, okay, they set it back, not thinking through this.
Yeah.
There's
yeah, and I don't think they made any
reliance,
mistakes, but
even though,
And maybe it's because I'm in the business and I feel like that should not be the surveyor's responsibility, but that's okay. I mean,
Yeah.
again, it's a covenant house. I mean,
well, there's reason.
I want to figure out a
Yeah.
way to make it work for the guy. I'm just saying, it's really, I don't think I'm questioning
I
that,
guess
yeah.
that's.
It would be easy to fix this if there weren't window wells on either side of the stoop.
exactly.
right.
There were a lot of good,
Yeah.
were a lot of good alternatives had this come in sooner that they could have adjusted their plans for to allow this to work,
Yeah.
which is really frustrating.
Yeah, and I think part of the problem was when they figured it out before they had finished, they looked at the bylaw that had been adopted at town meeting and thought, oh, we're all set with that. And it didn't occur to anybody that there was going to be any problem until Marcus pointed out that technically the way this is written, they didn't qualify. So that, and as you pointed out, by that time, the fix is a little crazy of trying to build up the grade, 2 feet.
Well, the funny thing is, like, they already have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 steps out of their parking area. It's not like they haven't, do you know what I mean?
I think that was cut into the existing grade.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying, it's not like, it's sort of, I don't know, just seems like they stuck the house up way too high. But, again, I just don't know what to base I don't want to give variance to the language.
Stephen, this is the first house that he's done, correct?
For himself, yeah.
For himself.
And it's for himself.
Yes. Yeah, this is an owner-occupied affordable housing covenant house. It's not, they've never owned property before.
That's one of the reasons why I'm willing to overlook, his major mistake. This is the reason why we have 40Bs, is because we have a ginormous gap of housing that doesn't exist for people that need it. The guy clearly wanted to save money, I get it, and he went forward and he tried to cut a corner, and the cake that he baked didn't come out tasting
Quite
so
right.
good.
Yeah.
You worry that opens up the floodgates too. You
Not
know,
in this
it's not a
particular
40B
one.
Argument,
Not in this
I want
one.
affordable housing, so
I'm not using affordable housing as the base. I'm
Doesn't
saying
even go towards
this
affordable.
this is a reason why we have such a ginormous hole of missing housing. We gotta cater to some people. We gotta overlook some things. This is one of them.
Well,
There,
could we
there's certainly,
base this on a variance, not based on the language, as Stephen is saying, but because of it would be a real
Yeah.
financial hardship.
Yes.
It's a covenant house. It
Yeah.
obviously has topography.
Yeah,
He might not have handled it the best way, but it obviously has. I'd rather do that
I'd
than.
rather do that.
Because I frankly think that if the whole stair thing to me is not a good argument.
Well, I think since you just said that about the 8 stairs going to the parking, and Steven saying that he thinks they cut that out, like there already is a big grade change on
There is a
that
there is a
property,
big
so
grade change
we
on the
could
property.
I could see my way there.
And I could definitely see the financial
Yeah,
hardship.
that's a
Yeah.
Where
covenant
you guys
house.
can too. That's
Yeah.
that's what stands out. You don't wanna crucify somebody for making,
I'd-
trying to save.
I agree. I'd rather do the variance in that vein versus the reasonable reliance on the survey.
The
Yeah.
topography.
Yeah,
Yeah, the topography and
hardship.
financial. Yeah, I can.
Okay.
great.
Before we move forward, is there anyone in the audience to speak for this one? Okay, so any further discussion by the board? Anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make that motion to grant the relief as a variance
Do
based
we
on.
have a motion on the floor? Excuse me.
I don't think so.
Oh, Karen,
Yeah.
was that?
Do you want to pull your motion or?
Yeah.
Pull my motion
Okay.
for Lisa.
Okay, sorry. Thank you, Michael.
Okay, so variance relief based on the topography of the lot, the unusual topography of the lot, and the financial hardship that would be required to fix the issue.
Second.
Do you want to condition it at all? No further
I mean,
encroachment in the front yard setback?
yes,
And
Yeah.
we're giving 1.7 feet.
yes, not
Yeah.
5 feet,
Yeah,
1.7 feet.
the encroachment as it exists today, as shown on the survey plan.
So why did
May I
Bracken,
read that back to you?
can I ask one question? I'm just curious. Why did Bracken do the as-built?
I
If those other
don't-
guys pinned it?
Yeah, I don't know. Oh, I do know. Bracken did the subdivision. So they had them come in, since they had all the data, they had them come in to do
I
that.
wonder why he didn't just have him pin it.
I think it was a little beg and borrow for a lot of this, frankly.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead, Eleanor.
The motion is to grant the relief as requested based upon topography and financial hardship, condition that there shall be no further encroachment within the front yard setback, without further relief from the board.
Mm-hmm.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So that's unanimous?
Yeah.
Thank you, I appreciate that, and I'm sure the class will sleep better tonight. Thank you.
Okay. So let's see, so next, we have 3518 79R Orange Street LLC, 79R Orange Street, John Brusher presenting for the applicant. Let's see.
For some
Ed,
reason my copy doesn't show.
well, do you have the staff report?
You're on it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're on
so
it,
it's
Michael.
Lisa, myself, Michael, Karen, Ed was on there, so either Jeff or Jim should sit. Jeff, you gonna sit?
Sure.
Okay. So Jeff.
This has already been opened.
It has.
Yeah.
Correct.
So as long as they were in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good afternoon. For the applicant, Attorney John Brescher, representing 79 Orange LLC. We were before you at the September meeting for a special permit request, and just to reiterate, it was the property is 79 Orange Street, and it has since been subdivided under the 4181L provision. The yarn store remains a commercial structure, but there is also a commercial garage on the property, which the applicants are intending to convert into a residence. Because the garage is non-conforming with respects to setbacks, special permit relief is necessary in order to alter the use of a pre-existing non-conforming structure. At the last hearing, we presented that there is an addition. I have submitted a revised site plan showing that the proposed addition complies with all of the setbacks for the garage lot. The site plan also shows 2 parking spaces, one 9 by 16 and another 15.9 by 9. And at Mr. Toole's request, I provided let me get the proper chapter and verse here, but it was MGL 266-120B, which is an interesting provision of Mass General Laws, which actually allows a neighbor to enter onto a property owner's land so as not to commit waste. In other words, to make repairs to a building. Interestingly, I spoke with the other attorneys in my office who are much more experienced and way smarter than I am, and they had a situation come up where the neighbor still refused to do so, and they actually had to go to this police station and post a $1,000 bond, and then they were allowed access to make that repair. Thankfully, that is not before us, because I've also submitted letter from the homeowner as well as from the neighbor saying they're fine with reciprocal entering onto each other's property to make renovations, additions, etc. So I don't think we should have any issues or concerns with that. So that's what we have. As we said, at this point the addition is conforming to all the setbacks, and so really the issue before you is whether or not this change of use from a pre-existing non-conforming garage to a conforming residential use is substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing nonconformity, and we would opine that because we are converting to a conforming use, it is not more detrimental to the neighborhood. The owner is here as well if you have any questions, but please let me know if you have any questions too.
So, I mean, the only question I have no problem with this at all, but could they just put a dimension to the setback on the easterly side that shows the addition is 5 feet away? There's a 4.2, I'm assuming that's to the existing corner.
It's in the staff report.
Oh, it's a separate one, sorry. I'm looking at an old one.
If it helps, I have extra
Yeah, oh,
site.
yeah,
I have
I
extra
have it.
site plans.
Oh, yeah, so I see it's pulled in on this drawing a little bit.
Yes.
Oh, right.
Got it, okay. So, that was my only comment.
So that provision of the law is interesting.
And
I don't think we've been made.
I do have an issue with one thing you did say. You gave Ed credit for saying
Oh.
that was
My apologies. My apologies. Let the record reflect that.
So would this even be applied to situations where you're
you have a bad name.
digging a foundation?
I don't think so, I think it's for maintenance, right?
I think that's
Yeah.
right. They say,
Foundation's really-
I believe it is so as not to commit waste.
Posted $1,000 bond, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was more for repairs in the situation I was aware of, for repairs, not for total. Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions, discussion, issues? I think the applicant answered everything that we requested. Is there anyone in the audience to speak to this one? No. Okay. Does someone want to make a motion?
I'll make that motion to grant the relief as requested based on the site plan from Blackwell dated October 9th, 2018.
Condition upon getting a setback in?
It's there on
here.
this new one.
It's on this one.
Oh, it is?
On the one in the
Yeah,
staff report
There's
has
a
it.
new one right here. It shows it.
Oh, okay.
And are we doing time of year, the no exterior
Yeah.
construction from the Memorial Day to Columbus?
Labor Day.
Labor Day, is that what we're doing?
Yeah.
Okay,
I'll second that.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye.
aye.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I'm gonna read, because I can send out this one, so I'm gonna read it after. There's something you're gonna do.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on to new business. We are at new business, 3718, Whitney A. Gifford, trustee, 190 Cliff Road Nominee Trust, 190 Cliff Road, and Attorney Arthur Reed presenting for the applicant.
Thank you very much. Arthur Reed, as you noted, for the applicant. With me is Mark Catone, the architect for the project. What we're dealing with here is a lot on Cliff Road with existing dwelling and secondary dwelling on it. Been there for some time. This area was originally zoned as R2, or what's now R20, 20,000 square foot zoning. And along with a number of other parcels on the west side of town, was rezoned into Lug 1, limited use general 1, 40,000 square foot zoning, with 7% ground cover permitted, whereas in R20, 12.5% permitted. That rezoning took place in 2006. The ground cover, the pre-existing ground cover of the property was at approximately 7.6%, and thereby became a pre-existing non-conforming situation upon the passage of the bylaw amendment to rezone it. The result is that we're over on our ground cover at the present time, and in 2012 we came in with a request for a modification of the property, for a request for a special permit, as is allowed in order to increase ground cover or other dimensional nonconformities, where the property is already pre-existing nonconforming with regard to those nonconformities. We are increasing the nonconformity, but the standard is whether it is substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing nonconformity, and that can be done by special permit, as you know, in the case of single and two-family residential properties. In 2012, as I mentioned, a special permit was granted to increase the ground cover by approximately 288 square feet by taking an area at the rear of the main house, which now contains a pergola, and by converting it into an enclosed portion of the house. That work, however, was never done. And we're now coming back with a somewhat altered proposal that would add 234 square feet of enclosed ground cover in that location, as well as removing another small portion of the house and replacing it, the result of that change increasing the ground cover by 9 square feet, which winds up with our being approximately 7.6% ground cover. There's some differences in the calculation of ground cover between the way it was being done in 2012 and the way it is now, because the earlier plan that we had was based upon the old calculation of ground cover to the corner boards of the structure. And this structure has considerable jigs and jogs around its perimeter that result in, now that it's calculated to the foundation, that being reduced to some extent. In any event, what we're proposing to do is very similar to what was allowed in 2012. We now want to go forward with that project. We can explain any aspect of it that you want to hear about, but that's the substance of what we're dealing with.
Can I ask you a question? You said 7.6, the as-built says 7.8 proposed from Jeff.
Let's see.
So it's a,
I've been back and forth looking at different plans on this. The current plan, we have a proposed conditions and an existing conditions plan that are in the file.
right.
And the existing conditions plan shows the ground cover at the present time at, just to confirm, 7.26. And the proposed ground cover will go to, I'm sorry, 7.8.
Okay, I
It
just
was
wanted to clarify.
7.6 as calculated previously
To the corner boards.
to the corner boards. And
Right.
also there was another small change, that something was removed that results in it. So in those numbers being the ones that we're dealing with today.
So the special permit that granted the additional 288 square feet is obviously gone.
Yeah, that's expired.
Yeah.
Was there a mistake on that permit? Is that where the 7.6 came from?
No, it's to the corner boards.
Different
Okay.
calculations.
Gotcha.
So you basically gained 63 square feet on the main house and 15 on the garage.
Right.
I'm not sure if the cabana is counted towards the ground coverage. It's shaded as if it is, but it's not given a value.
The cabana is now an open pergola. So it's no longer being calculated as
Okay.
ground cover.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
That was an issue that came up previously, whether an open pergola counted as ground
Right,
cover.
I
and it
saw
was
that.
determined by the board that it did not.
So, I mean, of late, we've been looking for people to provide information about other lots. You know, I mean, I know now you're asking for 9 square feet over what you had before, correct?
9 square feet more in one location, and we've gone down from 288 to 234.
But
in
the
other
net- the
location.
net increase
So we're
is 9.
we're asking for a smaller net increase than we had previously.
Well, you had asked for 288 before.
Right,
Now it says
So now they're
you're
asking-
asking for 234 plus what's the other addition? It says.
9.
So it's 243 total, right?
Oh, I
It's
see.
243. The 9 is
Total.
an increase over a little L on the house that's being removed and being replaced. And in the course of replacing it, it goes up by 9 square feet.
But it's sort of, yeah.
So instead of 288 increase,
But that was to the corner board, so that would have been
right,
less.
exactly. It was,
Yeah.
but the calculation was 288 then, and we're now talking about 234 plus 9 or 243.
I agree that we have asked for the ground cover ratios in the vicinity, but I feel like this one is a lot smaller than the ones that we've had
Well,
recently.
but, yeah, no, I agree, although it is, just to be clear, it's 243, it's not just 9.
No, 243. Yep, because the special permit that expired, that's off the table. I think it is instructive to show that we did grant that relief in the past. But for this area where it was zoned R20, it was R20, right? Now it's
Yeah.
lug 1, and it was 12.5, and now I just feel like it's not going to be the largest one in the area.
No, I mean, you can tell by the GIS map it's
Yeah.
not, it's just whether or not you wanted something in the file that we've asked other people to provide.
As far as the conditions on the surrounding lots are concerned, I think you can see from the aerials that Eleanor very kindly put into your packet and the staff report that this is quite consistent with other houses in the neighborhood. In fact, that the houses on the adjacent properties from those appear to be substantially larger than this house. Bear in mind, this area was, in fact, as I mentioned originally, developed, and houses were mostly built when it was in R20 zoning, and therefore they were working with 12.5% ground cover in those cases. And I think, as I say, I think relatively modest increase that we're proposing here, and again, which was comparable to what the board previously had approved in the now expired special permit, in no way exceeds the conditions on other parts of the neighborhood, neighboring houses in the area.
As HDC approved.
Yes.
I assume there's no mail from the
So I was
neighbors.
just going to say that. Yeah,
No.
I don't think we saw anything.
Nobody's in the audience.
No, anyone in the audience to speak for this one? Okay. Does anyone want to make a motion for this one? Or have further
I
discussion?
would make a motion to approve the relief as requested.
I'll second that.
Okay. All those in favor? Michael. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
That was unanimous, I think, right?
I think so.
Much quicker than Mr. Toomey.
Who do we have voting on it?
I voted.
Susan, Michael, Lisa, Kira, Jeff.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so next up is 3818 Ronald J. Augustine, 3 Cassius Court, Patricia Halstead representing.
Patricia Halstead for the applicant. We're basically seeking reissuance of the same relief, pretty much that was granted in December of 2013, to demolish and rebuild the existing garage. It would be extended 8 feet into its northerly direction and going up to a height of up to 16.2 feet. I have existing condition or proposed conditions plan from Jeff Blackwell that just came Again, we received the approval back in December 2013, but the applicant never did the work.
So it's the same application.
It is, except the application before, I think, was limited to 15 feet, and we're asking up to 16.2.
In the elevation.
Yes. But otherwise, it's the same. And I saw the conditions recommended in the staff report. No exterior work from May 15th to Labor Day in any given year, and that's fine. A height limitation up to 16.2, and of course that's fine. And we just add maybe that there be a reference that, as shown on the plan that I just gave you, that the expanded garage will be approximately about 4.5 feet from the property line, plus or minus. Maybe we could attach the plan as an exhibit if you'd like.
Okay.
4.5 is what it says.
Yeah, just 4.5. And we have HDC approval. The garage is deteriorating. I think it was built in 1950s. It's kind of a metal building, nothing special.
Does anyone have any comments or questions? I don't have any issue with this one. I don't think we got any mail on it. Is there anyone in the audience to speak to this one? No. Okay. Anyone want to make a motion for this one?
Make the motion.
With the conditions in the staff report and including, okay, so plan as exhibit, no closer than 4.5, okay.
In conformance with the plan submitted
Yeah.
today, proposed conditions, no higher than pursuant to HGC approval and construction work.
That's my motion.
Anyone?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. No.
Okay, good.
But Jim does. Pass it down to him.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Do you have a copy of this plan, Eleanor?
But I'll take the ones you have.
Okay.
Don't mind.
Thanks. Okay.
Have we closed our hearing?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, before you leave, just a quick question. I'm going to be, for the next month, putting on the agenda the 2019 meeting schedule. And we had certain people like you and Michael who have issues with the January meeting. So I'm not asking you to respond now, but please respond to the email I'll send out with.
I responded earlier, actually.
Oh, okay.
When you asked to respond?
No, not to that. This is the whole meeting, regular meeting schedule for
Okay.
2019. I have to book the room. But that second Thursday's always been a problem for people for years. So I'm just gonna, since you're leaving, I'm just gonna send an email, so just ask you to get back to me so I can get Maria Davis the good dates. Okay?
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't think I replied to the 40B.
That's fine. I'll get you.
I didn't either because I didn't really know yet.
I mean, as many as I guess we
No,
possibly can, but
That's
again, not to,
Yeah.
prefer not to do it on Tuesday.
Okay. All right. Bye. Okay. So, moving on to the next one, 3918, Shirley A. Watts, owner, and Ron Conway, applicant, Valley View Drive, and Michael Wilson representing.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. Michael Wilson on behalf of the applicants who are here, son and grandson, Messrs. Conways. The property address is, I think, specifically identified as 0 Valley View Drive. It was created under a A&R subdivision. The lot in question is conforming as to all dimensional requirements. It jogs, as you can see in your addenda to the application, versus plan. The lot was designed to protect Shirley Watts's home, which is the lot that is slightly larger and to the west, which accounts for the jogs, and you can see the purple indication for a proposed screening. The applicant benefited at the time of the subdivision from the RC2 zone. 5-foot side setbacks were the law of the day, and the property then subsequently went to the R5 zone, where one side yard can be 5 and other ones 10. As proposed, the 10-foot setback would be from the son/grandson's property, the locus, and grandmother's house, leaving the 5-foot setback for the neighbor Culp, who I know is represented by Mr. Cohen and has lodged an objection to it. What they're asking for is special permit relief, which you may grant to the 10-foot setback that would be between the grandson's house and the grandmother's house. It wouldn't interfere with the 5-foot setback that abuts Culp, and I believe the same attorney represents Burns, Todd Burns. I know Jessica Burns is no longer affiliated with that property. So Mr. Burns, I think, objects as well. Curiously, I don't know why, because it doesn't affect the Burns property. It really, I think he's just objecting to the construction of a house on vacant land. Culp's object to it, but the relief being requested is not the property that abuts Culp. The only person really would have a gripe about granting a waiver, a special permit to waive the 10-foot down to about 7 feet would be Shirley, the grandmother. And of course, she's the applicant. She's asking that you approve that. The modest building that's proposed is depicted on Val Oliver's design. If the special permit is not granted, it reduces the approximate building envelope down to 18 feet wide, which is a rather impractical footprint for Mr. Conway's house, the grandson. So with the special permit relief going from 10 to approximately about 6 or 7 feet off of Shirley Watt's property, it allows the building to be about 25 feet wide. That's the extent of the relief that's being requested. If you look at the balance of the lots that were created out of the A&R, they're all the 5,000 square foot that dimensionally complied at the time that it was RC2 and still to this day are there. Grandma kept her lot, jogged the lot that's 5,001 square feet around her back deck. With respect to the motivation for this, the construction is to provide housing for family. It's also going to provide necessary funds for the applicant, Ms. Watts, who's 80, still has a mortgage on her property, services that mortgage in part by renting out rooms. And at this stage in her life, to have her grandson living next to her and not have to rent out rooms is a very attractive option for the sake of asking that the building be closer than 10 feet to the property line.
Does anyone have any comments or concerns?
I have a question.
Yes.
Is there any plantings proposed between the applicant's lot line and the Culp's, or on the lot line?
Mr. O'Mara, as you point out, the purple dots that Val Oliver's plan depicts, the screening does not continue all the way up. If that's something that the board felt was necessary, although keep in mind that that lot line setback is only 5 feet, and it only has to be 5 feet.
Mm-hmm.
But if it were requested that screening continue up to the corner on Valley View Drive, I don't think the applicant would have a concern about that.
There's already previous screening there, there's already a hedge between Culp's property.
There
That's
is.
Mr. Conway, the applicant's
Okay.
grandson. The balance of it is proposed as part of the construction so that there is an adequate buffer between the applicant's house and her grandson's property. And as you can see, to the extent that Todd Burns would have any visual impacts, the building envelope isn't going to change for Burns, and it won't change for Culp. But the screening and the planting is certainly proposed in
So that
acceptable
the
condition.
10-foot side yard will maintain, you're saying it will be reduced, they can then.
That's right.
What is it now? What was it?
25. The building envelope, yes, the building is 23. The building envelope would be 25, where the 10-foot setback would be.
So what would you lose? Is it simply 25?
It would make a 23-foot wide house 18 feet wide.
It's a pretty modest house as proposed, as you can see in the next 2 pages of the packet. The floor plans are provided. This is not a big structure. It is very consistent with the other properties and the other buildings in the neighborhood.
And
All the other lots created were 5,000 square foot lots.
And regardless of our decision, the 5-foot setback is still going to be on the Culp's side.
That's right, the 5-foot would be on the Culp side, so it's really just sort of unnecessarily narrowing the house. I think you would hear that the applicant would be in favor, at least as to Lot 1, Shirley Watts would be in favor of it. The only person truly aggrieved by encroaching on the lot line. Neither Burns nor Culp will have any impact on their property because of the relief requested. What's benefited by turning the property, the building proposed from 23 feet wide to 18 wide? How does that interfere with the integrity of the neighborhood and the type of housing that we see in this neighborhood? I would submit it doesn't.
Is there anyone in the audience to speak to this one?
Stephen Cohen, I represent Mr. Burns and Mr. Kolb. I've already submitted a letter to the file, which Mr. Wilson alluded to, and which I'm sure you've read. I won't read it to you, but it basically boils down to the fact that this neighborhood has already been heavily, densely built out, and anything that would help leave a little green space and a little openness would be a benefit to the neighborhood. And making a building, 20, 30% wider is a lot more density on a narrow portion of the lot. It will have an impact because it just fills the lot even more. In this particular case, this is a subdivision of land by an owner that has the ability, who both made this situation and has the ability to cure it themselves. This board is very hesitant to give relief in general where the owner has the ability to cure it, and secondly, where there's a benefit that is residing on Miss Watts' lot based on the way the lot line were drawn, and then they're asking to not have that taken into account. So essentially, it's double dipping on that 5 feet. So they left the extra 5 feet on Miss Watts' land, and now they're asking to essentially make it up over here without any giving up anything over there. This board is historically not given in when people are asking to have it both ways. I'm sure Mr. Conway would be a great addition to the neighborhood. I think it's great that you'd have a multi-generational situation there. But there's no actual need for this. It's a want, it's a like, but it does have other ways that it can be cured, and it does have a negative impact on the neighborhood by just adding just that much more density. So I'd ask the board to take into concern the fact that there are neighbors who are just overwhelmed by the amount of density and don't think there should be relief granted when the rules could be complied with. Thank you.
Mr. Cohen, could you just explain where the double dipping is?
Sure. I mean, they could move the lot line in back of the deck on Miss Watts' yard. A lot of people, when they take a lot and subdivide it, you end up, the house is in the middle, so they have to move the house in order to create a lot. This is a very oddly shaped lot, and it's difficult to build in this lot. And the reason why it's difficult is because all this land and setbacks were left on the other side. So, a lot of people, when they go to subdivide their land, they have to move their house, they have to rip a deck off, they have to make adjustments to make it work. But here, they drew the lot line 5 feet around everything, and that's why it's got all these weird little jogs in it that makes it difficult to build on now. So they left, they had zero negative impact on the existing lot to create a lot that was extremely difficult to build on, and now they want waivers for that. So, it could have been done the way a lot of other people are forced to do it, which is remove the deck or move the house or draw the line differently.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May I make an observation as to that abutter's opposition? It seems it's an opposition based on the philosophical theory that you ought not grant relief, which the code permits you to do. don't think he's objecting to the construction of the property, and I think he points out that if this lot line were drawn differently, the proposed building can be built without the relief if we have to go back to the expense of redesigning or tearing off grandma's rear deck. That's what he's asking for. Tear off the deck and then you can build what you want.
You know, I would venture to guess that even if you were to remove the deck and change the lot lines, the house is still gonna stay 5 feet from the Cole property line. I would-
Precisely, and that's what the abutter is proposing the applicant do, and it seems to be a rather, I would say, short-sighted proposal for how to address the relief that's being requested. The relief is not exorbitant, and the argument that more green space would be nice is not something furthered by your denial. Take a look at the building envelope. I mean, you could, I suppose, build an L-shaped building at more expense and reduce even further Mr. Cohen's desire to have more yards. But really what he's asking is that she go through a financial hardship to rejigger a lot line to build the same building with no net benefit to, I suppose, his argument.
I agree with Jeff. I think that the 5 foot's gonna stay on the Culp side, so there doesn't seem to be a benefit on the Culp's side. The one thing that, you know, if it made them feel better and we were open to do some screening, I mean, I don't think there's any harm in that. And the applicant has already said there's a shed, I mean, not a shed, sorry.
Existing.
A hedge. But yeah, even if the lot line was changed, it would be changed away from their house. And it's within our purview to change the setback from 10 to 5, and we can do it under special permit. And when it was an RC, it was RC2, correct?
It
And
was,
that
and Madam Chair, as you
and-
point out, they would have been entitled to that.
Right, that was 5 feet anyway, and that was what most of the rest of the neighborhood was built under, so I don't see it being substantially more detrimental, but I'm one person, so. Does anyone else have any?
I don't have any issues with it. Would you guys be open for the screening then?
Yes.
I mean, if there's already a hedge there, I don't know how much screening we want to require, but.
With
No.
respect to maintaining or continuing the
Screen it right to
proposed
the
hedge
edge of the
line
Yeah.
that
You
is
can't-
on
you can't tell from
Oliver's
this
plan.
picture, but does the hedge line go the entire length of that property line?
It does.
Yeah, Jack.
Actually,
Jack.
Cole, it was a lot higher. The Cole cut the hedge down 3 or 4 feet. I don't know why, but cut the hedge down probably half the size of what it originally was.
So on that plan, you would be willing to extend that hedge line down to the property line there?
I think what the applicant's saying is that the purple on the plan is what's going to be provided because it's already there where it terminates along Culp. And I think that's what Mr. Conway is saying, that it's there, but the Culps have lowered its height. To the extent that Conway can keep it without Culp cutting it, absolutely. If it gets removed by Culp and a condition of the applicant is to continue the screening on their property, then he would.
Okay.
This looks to me like it's on the applicant's property, the hedge.
According to Ms. Oliver's depiction, yes.
Okay. Okay. But you would be willing to continue the hedge even if it's not a straight line on your property along the edge of the house all the way to the end of the house on Valley View Drive? Okay,
Yes, for the applicant, yes.
okay.
So just as a clarification, since my position was being asserted for me, I wasn't actually saying that what they should do is rip off grandma's deck. That was just, something that a lot of people do. They have a lot, they move the house, they move the deck or whatever. It's how people make things work to do a subdivision of a lot, as opposed to jogging around. If the board is inclined to grant this relief, I would ask for 2 conditions. One, the screening, which you've already proposed, and the second one, that there be no duplex as long as the relief is granted. And that's not obviously what's proposed, so it should be fine. In other words, a house like this is a lot less density and impact than a duplex.
Right, so I'm not sure why we would mention the duplex.
Because
now.
once you grant the relief, they can do whatever they want.
More parking.
Okay.
It's more parking, it's more people. So the relief shouldn't enable them to have, employee housing or a duplex or whatever.
Understood.
So, they could always come back to the board and ask for changes, but that's the relief that we'd like. Then that would, I think, add to the spirit of the application.
So we could add a condition that says in substantial conformance with the plan provided, and any changes would need further relief from the board.
And we also, I'll make that motion if nobody has it. But one of the things is possibly just on this drawing, we sketch out where the screening is
I'll
going to
have
go.
a plan submitted that will further the purple from where it
Right.
terminates to the corner bound on Valley View. Realizing that that wouldn't be installed if it presently exists, as Mr. Conway says, it's
Correct.
there. But
Right.
the obligation would be if it's taken away by Culp, Conway will put it in. We'd like to keep what's there rather than rip it out and put something in,
Of course.
but we're going to add all of the
But
rest.
there's a
Well, if it's
question of
on-
whether it's on Culp's property or not.
Yeah.
I don't
I mean,
know
if-
why he would take it out.
If he
but-
takes it down, they'll put it up, they'll continue it to the corner terminating on Valley View on their property entirely.
Okay.
I would ask, and I don't think there's any intent to deceive the board with the plans. I don't think Mr. Conway has any concepts or thoughts. I saw him nodding his head approvingly at the suggestion that you take away the right to have a duplex, but I think that might be going rather deep into the code. And yes, of course, you can condition special permits with any number of aspects, but to speculate whether that would be coming down the road, I don't know that that's something that I would ask. I don't think that these folks have any concerns about that if you
I don't
were
think
to, if
we-
you were to
I don't
impose
think-
it, but I don't know that that's something that the board ought to be, start taking leaps into
I don't-
prohibiting authorized uses. You would have to come back for a
Yeah.
permit anyway, and at that point, if there were a problem with parking, it would have to be addressed. But I just would ask that the condition be the screening and the maintained screening versus prohibiting some potential future use that may be permissible by right.
Well, I don't think we were excluding it specifically, just saying that the house conformed.
As depicted,
As
if
depicted,
it's
and-
changing, come back, no problem
No
with that.
saying, we're not saying that they couldn't do that, but just, I think it's pretty standard for us to say that and attach a plan and then just say any
I
further
agree.
relief come back. So,
That plan is finalized.
The plan is a modular home, so it's as finalized as this modular home company is building it.
I don't wanna give something if you're just gonna get it, come back.
Right, yeah.
Well, I think in substantial conformance, if it tweaks somewhat from what we have here,
Yeah.
I don't think the footprint is proposed to change at all. But
It's
if,
currently, as proposed, a single-family home.
absolutely, as proposed on Val Oliver's plan, which is part of your packet.
and do you have HDC approval yet? Or
We're
even-
waiting to decide if we could 18 feet wide or if it could be
Oh,
23
right,
feet wide.
okay, yeah, right. So then, would we want to wait and see, have,
Oh, well, that, what are those plans, is that 23?
Yeah, I don't know if you don't have them, but
Oh,
here they
yeah.
are.
it's in this end of the staff
It's in
report,
the
so.
packet. It's, excuse me.
So if we're gonna, with that, don't we usually like to see HDC approved plans? I mean, I don't wanna continue.
We would agree that the building would be built in substantial conformity with the plans that were attached to the application, and that if there's any deviation, that you come back and point that out. It's not going to, building won't be built outside the available building footprint that's created.
I would advise, it's not a condition of the approval, but I would advise that the applicants get very friendly with the surveyor for this project.
We've got to make sure the steps are,
Every
yeah.
step of the road.
we recognize that we have a very small footprint in which to work.
Because if you're 4'11.5" I have a feeling that the neighbor is gonna be at that next meeting.
Yeah, give yourself some wiggle room.
We will.
So I don't wanna make a misstep here, and if we, believe we usually want HDC approved plans, but do we need them in this case because we're talking about setbacks versus, the setback's a setback, they can't.
Yeah, I don't think there's a
I would
topography
say
issue.
this, that I think that it's more of the chairman's choice. And Chairman Toole liked to see elevations and HDC plans. The prior 10 chairmen before him didn't feel that way. So
If I may, through you, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
The request to, or the inclination by the board to request other board approvals outside their purview, that is a judgment call on your behalf, but again, this is a structure, they could have just gone to HDC without this approval.
Right,
So I don't see how cart horse.
right, yeah,
I don't
yeah,
think in this instance
I agree,
that would be warranted,
I agree.
my personal
I
opinion.
just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing a step. So, did you make a motion?
Thank you, Eleanor.
I didn't realize that Linda was in the audience because she can go back further than 10 chairmen.
We don't need it. Did one of you guys make a motion over there?
I did make.
Any second?
I'll second
Okay, so to grant the relief as requested by special permit to reduce the westerly side yard setback from 10 feet to 5 feet, as shown on the plan submitted with the application.
Is
And
it-
the usual condition, no further expansion within the setback without further relief from the board?
Is it westerly?
I think so.
I'm using a north up.
It's already easterly on the cold side,
Right.
already in the 5-foot setback on the cold.
Right.
That's,
It's like,
Northwest.
I don't know, I don't agree with that.
what do you think it is?
This lot line right here?
This one.
That's definitely westerly.
Yeah. This one's gonna stay
Okay.
5 feet, this one's gonna move in 5 feet. Okay.
And per the submission of a revised plan from the designer, from Val Oliver, that shows the screening all the
Depicting
way.
the screening.
The actual and proposed screening.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Any further comments, anyone? Okay. So all those in favor? Aye.
Okay, so who is not, Jeff's?
Well,
1,
5
2,
of us.
3, all of us.
Oh, sorry,
Lisa's gone.
do the math. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Someone want a second?
That, 2:36.
Anybody want to say?
I'll second that.
Okay. All
There
those
was a
in,
decision that needs signatures, there are only 3 of the.
yep, Jim has it. So all those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
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 Jeff, you wanna
Job.
stay?
I just,